Good evening, and welcome to the City of Topeka Planning Commission meeting. We're a commission appointed by the mayor and city council to plan for the orderly growth and development of the community, to hold public hearings, and to make recommendations to the city council on planning items. Please note the city council rules state that the public hearings for planning cases shall be conducted solely by the planning commission. No additional public hearings will be conducted by the city council. Tonight's case is tentatively scheduled to be heard by the City Council next month. Agendas can be found at topeka.org. For cases that require public hearings, the procedure will be as follows. First, the planning staff will summarize the case. Next, we will hear from the applicant or the representative. Then we will receive public testimony. Public comments should be addressed solely to the chair and are limited to 4 minutes. Amanda, please take the roll.
Mr. Dean.
Here.
Here.
Sarah.
Here.
Mr. Presner.
Present.
Cal not present. Mr. Nager.
Here.
Ms. Pearson.
Here.
Mr. Tababin. Absent. So is Mr. Warner. That makes 6 present and 5 quorum.
Thank you. Next is the approval of minutes of the April 17th, 2023 meeting.
Mr. Dean.
Chair, if there's any questions about the minutes, I move for approval.
Do we have a second?
I second it.
Thank you. Any discussion? Amanda, could you please take the roll?
Mr. Dean.
Aye.
Mr. Freed.
Abstain.
Ms. Herron.
Abstain.
Presner.
Aye.
Niger.
Aye.
Aye.
4 approved and 2 abstained.
Thank you. Next, declaration of conflicts of interest or ex parte communications by members of the commission or staff. Do I have anything tonight? Mr. Nager?
Whenever it comes to the Potwin Lofts application, last time they brought something forward, I said the applicant is my landlord. That's still true. We still haven't had any discussion about any of this, and I still feel able to make a non-conflicted decision.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any others? If not, we can jump into action items. First on the agenda is the 2024-2033 CIP. Mr. Warner.
Commissioners, good evening. I'll handle this one, try to be brief about it. So the Planning Commission's role in the city's CIP is to ensure that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. You've got in your packet a memo, a list of projects, the spreadsheets associated with the city's CIP that highlights some of the projects, and then the individual project sheets. So I'll just go over the map real quick. This shows generally most of those CIP projects that are highlighted in the memo. There's 4 that I'll go over and give just a little more detail about, kind of moving west to east. The first is Elevation Parkway. This is a project that's been around for quite some time. This particular item in the CIP is to construct phases 1 and 2 of that roadway, which would take it from 37th and Gage to 41st and Fairlawn, and also from 37th and Fairlawn to 41st and Gage. There's money in there to construct those phases. Moving east, I've also highlighted Southeast 37th Street. Actually, I think it's Adams that's highlighted here. Adams is due to be reconstructed, provided the mill and overlay looks okay. So essentially where we had a zoning case a few months ago for some senior duplexes, that's roughly in this area, so that road is due for some work. The next one to the east is an interchange for I-470. This is roughly at 29th in California. Don't really have a location pinned down at this point, but there's money in the CIP to construct that interchange, which would be a new interchange along I-470. And then also highlighted there is a project on Lyman, I believe, in North Topeka. There's also, there's projects all around the city. There's projects in Oakland, projects kind of in the middle of the city with countywide half-cent sales tax projects. And also projects to the west. So a lot of different projects here in the CIP. So staff's recommendation is that the 2024-2033 CIP is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Be happy to try to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff, Mr. Preisner?
Thank you, Mr. excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Dan, question, why is the Elevation Parkway stop at Fairlawn and not go through to Wanamaker? Where did that fail? I was on the council when we discussed this project 20 years ago.
So currently there are 4 phases for that roadway. This CIP is identifying the first 2 for construction. There is a separate project that's kind of outside the scope of the CIP. There's a plan in process to sort of plan some land use in this area and plan for some water, sewer, and street work. So I would just say phases 1 and 2 cost, and just having enough money to at least get that started would be the reason for just the 2 phases.
Okay, so the second phase is scheduled to be completed by 2033. So you're saying phase 3 and 4, all the way to Wanamaker is an outlander, whatever it may be?
It quite possibly could get moved up depending on how the plan works out, depending on shifting priorities. Really what the CIP has right now is just those first 2 phases. That doesn't mean 3 and 4 are going to follow after, farther out. It's just, at this point, these are the 2 phases that are in the CIP.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about the growth of the community because the housing shortage, I know 2 things living here my entire life is Southwest Shawnee County. So Elevation Parkway would be 1, and the KTA providing something at Auburn and the Turnpike. And that would totally open up growth, and of course, Auburn Road. So I'm just curious, wanted to know. Thank you.
Dan, I've got a question for you. We had a recent case up north off Rochester Road where the road seemed to be a major issue with the development of that area. And I see it's not on here. I wonder if that's in the horizon anywhere, maybe redoing Rochester Road north of 24 Highway.
That project is not in the city's CIP currently.
Any other questions for the staff? If not, we'd be open for
Mr. Chair,
a
motion to approve as presented by staff.
moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, Amanda, will you please take the roll?
Mr. Dean,
Aye.
Mr. Freed,
Aye.
Ms. Herron,
Aye.
Mr. Presner,
Aye.
Mr. Nager,
Aye.
Ms. Pearson.
Aye.
And it passes 6-0.
Thank you. Item number 2, public hearing of HL 23-01 by Potwin Lofts LLC. Mr. Sharp, would you like to Present.
Yes. I just turned off. Sorry. Okay. Yes, so this is for local landmark designation of the Potwin Presbyterian Church located at 400 Southwest Washburn Avenue. Just as a quick refresher, we have local landmark designation here in Topeka through ordinance. We have currently 43 designated local landmarks here within the city. However, our last nomination was in 2015, so we haven't done this in a while, but we're looking forward to more people coming forward with their historic preservation ideas. So again, this is at 400 Southwest Washburn. The church was built in 1923, and staff is recommending approval of the nomination as a local landmark. To get into the location a little bit, to the left there is the aerial picture. It sits catty corner. Directly to the northwest is the Potwin Place Historic District. It has been a National Register Historic District since 1980, one of the oldest neighborhoods in Topeka. And again, it sits at kind of a crossroads between Washburn and Willow Avenue there. It's been there for 100 years now. Again, this is zoning action. This is to place an overlay district onto the property, designating it as a historic landmark. So just to get into the zoning a little bit, the property is currently zoned as PUD planned unit development with X1 mixed use district and M2 multiple family dwelling district use. The HL historic landmark overlay district will be added to the property, and the local landmark designation will not affect surrounding properties. Just to get into the history a little bit of the church, it was built in 1923. The pastor at the time of its opening was Reverend H.L. Nelson. The church was constructed in a late Victorian Gothic style architecture with some neoclassical features. The stained glass windows on the church are prominent features as well. There's over 40 stained glass windows that wrap around the church. There was an education wing added to the church in 1959, built in a mid-century modern design standards at the time. Local landmark designation is voluntary. It requires the owner to maintain the property with certain historic standards and prevent them from deteriorating. Again, this does not impose any restrictions or limitations on adjoining properties. With that, staff is recommending approval of the historic landmark overlay district, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff?
I have a question.
Yes.
So we recently did a matter on this property. Is there anything about this designation that in any way affects what we reviewed earlier?
No, I don't believe so.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Mr. Nager?
I see that the applicant is just the Potwin Lofts LLC. It's not also the church, it's just them.
Yes, the Potwin Lofts LLC, Mark Bernheide was the applicant.
Okay. And so the church doesn't have to participate in any way?
Well, Mr. Bernheide is the property owner, so I imagine
Okay.
any talks about participating, he would talk to the
Okay.
church about that.
I must have misunderstood. I thought that he was owning the apartment portion and the church still owned their portion.
Technically, he owns the entire parcel there.
All right. Makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? If not, do we have an applicant present to speak on this issue?
Yes, good evening. Thanks for allowing me to speak. Just real quick, Will, we actually own the church and the addition on the back, and we have a long-term lease with the church. So we're kind of their landlord. So, and they do support the nomination though. So I thought Mr. Sharp did a fine job of explaining the application and just backing up a little bit. You did, with your approval of the zoning change, we are building 6 apartments and the addition to the church on the east side of the church, but the church is remaining. And actually, we're adding air conditioning, heating, a new heating air conditioning system to the church, and we'll eventually undertake a restoration of the windows. So this is kind of the first step in us proceeding down that path. Eventually, we'll pursue a state and national register listing.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the owners?
I just have one. So when you're talking about like adding heating and air conditioning and you're doing it, none of that impacts, having this kind of designation doesn't impact your doing the work on that in any way?
No. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is the public testimony. Anyone is welcome to get up and speak. You have 4 minutes per person. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to speak on this issue tonight? If not, I will close public comment. Next is discussion by commissioners. And if no discussion, would be open for a motion.
I move to approve the requested designation as a historic landmark designation for the property at 400 Southwest Washburn.
Thank you. Have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any more discussion by the commissioners? If not, Amanda, would you please take the roll?
Mr. Dean?
Aye.
Mr. Freed?
Aye.
Ms. Herron?
Aye.
Mr. Presner?
Aye.
Mr. Nager?
Aye.
And Ms. Pearson?
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Next case, number 3, public hearing of Z 23-09. Mr. Sharp.
So this will be a rezoning from ONI 2 Office and Institutional District to M3 Multiple Family Dwelling District to allow for construction of residential dwelling units. The property is located on the southeast corner of Southwest 29th Street and Villa West Drive. Parcel is approximately 2.45 acres in size. With that zoning, the ONI 2 zoning, the parcel has remained vacant for over 27 years. Staff is recommending approval of the rezoning to M3 Multiple Family Dwelling District. To get into the existing zoning a little bit, you will see that the rezoning is within the character of the neighborhood. To the north, you have office zoning, ONI 1 Office and Institutional District with a real estate office, and on the east side there. On the west side, you have multifamily residential apartments at the northwest corner of that intersection. To the south, you have more ONI 2 Office and Institutional District. The properties on the west are all obviously office and institutional, with a couple of the lots remaining vacant and some of the lots with medical office buildings located there. And to the east, you have a PUD a planned unit development with M2 multiple family dwelling district use. Currently, it's being used as an assisted living facility, according to the Shawnee County Appraiser website. Future land use. The future land use of this area along 29th Street here, it's designated as office. Further to the east, you have Wanamaker, which is our heavy commercial. This office future land use designation offers a transition of land use from the high intensive land use of Wanamaker and the C4 commercial that's there over to the west where you have your single family neighborhoods in West Topeka. In our land use growth management plan, although this does say office, it does take into account for medium density residential developments. To quote the land use growth management plan in the office section, medium density residential developments that demonstrate compatibility with surrounding land uses may also be appropriate transitional land uses in areas designated as office, such as this one. So the rezoning to M3 would still be appropriate with the future land use. To reiterate, the property has been sitting vacant for over 20 years with its current zoning designation. The applicant is requesting this rezoning to allow for more options to develop this land and to allow for more residential dwelling units to be added to Topeka. This is consistent with other land uses nearby. Again, to the north is almost the same situation with office on one side and multifamily on the other side. This will still provide transition from the higher intensity uses of the C4 Wanamaker commercial corridor to the lower intensity land uses of our single family neighborhoods to the west. There was one comment, we've had comments about off-street parking for this parcel. Off-street parking will be addressed at the building permit phase or the site plan review phase. They will follow our off-street parking regulations that we have in Title 18, so that the off-street parking requirements will be enforced during the development. With that, staff is recommending approval of this rezoning, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Are there any questions for staff? Mr. Nager?
With it being a dead-end road and having like a potential apartment building on there, is there any concern with that and traffic flow or emergency services rather than it being like available for through traffic?
Will be addressed at the site plan phase.
I'll respond to that.
Okay.
Is the concern that the road is dead end? The
Yeah.
street there? So that was all addressed when it was platted. And I think there's a possibility for it, doesn't it stub? I think it stubs at one end. Is that your recollection? Yeah, so it stubs. If you go back to the other slide, I think it shows this. So one thing you can see there is the street stubs at the end. And that means that when that land gets platted, then, and the street gets dedicated, it potentially could go through. So it might connect. You can kind of see, I don't know if you can see it on the map. But there's a potential connection when that other land gets developed. This doesn't really have any impact on that because it's not in the path of that road extension.
All right.
Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Is it realistic that you could actually put a multiple family anything on that little strip?
Well, I believe the applicant can address some of those concerns, but measuring out the width of this parcel up to the north, on the north part there, it's 130 feet wide. Towards the middle, it's around 80 feet, and down to the south, it's about 155 feet wide. Yes, there are some elevation changes to this land, but that's something that the developer can address and can develop. There will be minimum setbacks would also be enforced as well, but we feel that there's enough room for setbacks and the buildings there.
Reed?
Was there any discussion about M2 versus M3 for this property?
I believe so. The M3 multiple family zoning, we believe that it's provided the applicant better options for the development of the land. With M2 zoning, you only have 15 dwelling units per acre. But with the M3 zoning district, it goes up to 30 dwelling units per acre. And again, the applicant does have to deal with some of the land issues with the elevation change to this land. So we thought that the M3 zoning would give them better options to try to develop it.
But I did notice that the other major difference that I saw between M2 and M3 is the maximum height of an M2 building is 50 feet, and the maximum height of an M3 building is 160 feet. And I'm just a little concerned if they can make it fit and that would meet their density and find all the off-street parking that they need to have, that would seem to be that height of a building would be out of character with the rest of the neighborhood and area, even with the commercial area. So I was just, do you all know if a 160-foot building, how many stories is that?
My estimate would, that could accommodate a 10-story building. I think there'd be real, just physical limitations to building a building very high like that. The applicant's here and they'll probably better answer those questions.
All right, thank you. Oh, one more question. In the description, it said about transition density, and it said medium. So we have M1, M2, and M3. So does M3, is that considered medium, or is M2 considered medium, or are they all considered medium? I just didn't know.
I don't think I know the answer to that question. I don't really think the zoning code is that specific in defining it. I don't want to say that I've looked at it and know for certain the answer to that question, but I think medium density is probably, M2 is probably more what you think of when you think of medium density, 15 units per acre.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? If not, is the applicant here to speak on this issue?
Good evening, Walker Bassett here. Thank you guys for meeting with us, and appreciate Mr. Sharp for giving the introduction. He did a great job. So yeah, we're pretty preliminary on the actual plans of this this lot. We haven't jumped deep into physical plans because, as you know, costs occur when that happens, and we're not so sure we can even get to that point yet without the rezoning. I guess why we're requesting this in the first place is kind of big needs housing. We all know this. That land, like he has said, has been there for a long time, and we'd love to make use of it. The owners are going to own it for a long time, if we don't, most likely, and they already have. We think it'd be a great spot for some multifamily development. And other than that, like I said, we're pretty preliminary besides that.
Any questions for the applicant? Reed?
Is there so I asked staff earlier, is there a reason why you selected M3 versus M2?
No, there's not really a specific reason. It gives us more options, as you well know. You know, we have 2.45 acres, and if I recall, it's 15 per acre with the M2, and M3 is 30. So, like he kind of said, you know, if we build into the hill type of deal, we might have to grow in height. I don't really see that being a problem. But other than that, no, there wasn't necessarily a specific reason. It just gives us more options.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll have a, it'll be open to public comment in a second. So- No problem. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, public testimony portion. This is limited to 4 minutes per person. Is there anyone who'd like to speak or ask questions? Just go up to this microphone and give your name and
Yeah, we'll get together. Hi, my name's Paul Wilson. This is my wife, Angela. We own, oh, you don't have the map up. So right across the street from this lot, Lot 2 on the west side, we own that lot and the building. My wife is a periodontist there, as well as other medical professionals on the street.
There's seven dental offices.
There's 7 dental offices. So needless to say, every 10 minutes there is traffic up and down that road. I saw a set of prints in 2018 for this lot that had a church on it, and it had street parking at an angle facing up the road. And at that time, I was thinking, well, as with a church, it might work. But obviously it's sat for 27 years and there's no church, and it's because it's unfeasible. If there's multiple family dwellings there and they're parking on the street with patients from all these dental offices driving up and down the street at 30 or 35, street parking is, I'm just saying, it is completely dangerous. It will be a very dangerous situation for a person who's loading their kids in and out of the back of a car any business afternoon. We don't have a problem with any structure that's built there. It's the street parking for me.
And the volume of people.
And the
If we
volume
have
of people
30 units, yeah.
that would be traveling up and down. And then obviously the future light that would be at 29th and Southwest Villa West.
And one. Or
And then
29th.
obviously all the parking issues that would be rampant there. So anyway, if
It's
you
a
wanna-
high traffic area. So, I mean, in addition to, because like I said, there's 7 different offices in 3 buildings. So, and then there's 2 lots that are zoned for commercial that could also end up having, you know, some type of office there as well. We're going to have another potential person in our building. So again, just the level of traffic, we already see traffic stuff. It's a curvy road. It's on a hill. So thinking of having 30 times however many families are in there, I just don't know how that road, again, when you mentioned about was mentioned earlier about the the road doesn't go through, it's a cul-de-sac. So from an emergency standpoint, I mean, that's a safety issue, and just even flow of traffic. Like, how does that work if we're at a cul-de-sac and we're going to increase the potential for that many more cars on the road?
My issue with the parking was it's angled up the street, right? So you have to go down, turn around the cul-de-sac to come up, or you're going to be coming down the street south and then have to jackknife your car back to the north, right, to park.
We understand the need for more housing. It's
And
just,
as we looked around the city, it doesn't seem tenable. It doesn't seem appropriate. It really just doesn't seem appropriate being sandwiched in between these businesses, which to the east, it's like the elevation change has got to be 30 or 40 feet.
across the street.
West to east.
It was mentioned across the street about the apartments and the commercial building. That commercial building is not a medical or dental office, so there's a little less traffic there. but it's also flat. It's not on a hill. So all of those factors definitely concern us.
And I would say the opinions of the previous commissions over the last however many years who have probably come up against a lot of prints for this lot, there's a reason why that they haven't been able to do anything with it. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on this case?
My name's Hank Hudson. I live in that area. It is a high traffic area in and out of that. Enormous amount of, well, there was 2 3-car wrecks there this weekend that tied up quite a bit of stuff onto it. So I guess my question, you have a very short, narrow piece of property on that, and we're talking about adding, what, 20 to 50 apartments or whatever or something in that. So we have enough challenges with street issues, but that one right there with it coming over the top of the hill, crisscrossing in and out of the Villa West area onto it. And we're only talking 120 feet width. So with setbacks and stuff like that, I guess I'm questioning there is an enormous amount of traffic that does come down in that area. After the doctors have all left, in fact, even at midnight, and things like that go down in that cul-de-sac and come back and around in there. So I'm just kind of curious on that thin strip and that what we're accomplishing in there by putting a type of residential housing in that. So, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at on it. Like I said, we live in that area and we see the traffic through that area. A lot of people walk through that area, but you know, there's a lot of traffic through there. And like I said, and the Villa West coming out and turning left and going to the east is pretty typical of accidents there any time of the day. So, like I said, and just another addition of adding that much traffic through that corner on there for what we're gaining for what we're adding. So,
Thank you.
Chairman?
Yes, Mr.
Can I
President.
ask the conferee a question?
Sure.
Do you live on the north side of 29th Street? Do I live? Yes, sir. No, I live. You're on the west side, so you're in unincorporated Shawnee County, correct?
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this case? Any other public comment?
So I work, my name is Gary Rust, and I work for the organization that owns Sherwood Apartments out of Colorado. And the only comment I would make to you in thinking about this project is if you go Villa West Drive and drive to the south and come up to the intersection of Villa West Drive and 29th Street, and the majority of the day to turn left, you got to gun it. Or, you know, and it's also a very low visibility corner too, so it makes it difficult to see traffic coming from the east down 29th Street that's in the right lane. That's the only comment I have.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Good evening. My name's Henry McClure. In 2000, I used to have all the property listed where the car wash is now, back to where the road would go through. And at that time, for several years, we couldn't get the city of Topeka to let us to get the street open. We were trying to open it up back then. And let me say that it's very tough to be a developer in this community. And when a guy comes forward and works with staff and they can sit down and find a plan that works within the plan, and this actually fits. I mean, this project makes sense. I think if you look at Thornton Place, it might be 3 levels, but also 2 from Thornton Place down. There's a huge drop off. But I think that I think you all did a good job trying to fix a solution to a property that sat fallow for so long. I'm actually a customer of hers. She may fire me as a customer after this, but I do go there all the time. You're doing good work, I'm telling you. And the traffic, there's not a traffic problem on this street. And so I hope you guys can find a way to support this. The applicant is a very qualified real estate professional, and he's going to build something that's cost effective. He's not going to build a 10-story building. So I hope there can be some compassion for a guy that's trying to develop in this community, and I hope you all can find support for this young man. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to have public comment on this? Okay. If not, we will close the public testimony and go to discussion by the commissioners. Is there any discussion on this issue?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Preisner.
quick question for staff. I was away from the community for a little bit, so did I miss something? I thought that everything from this property west to at least Urish, 29th, was unincorporated Shawnee County, correct? No.
So Will's gonna pull up the zoning map there. The single family to the west is zone R1, and that would only be the case if that was in the city. So that's, that development's in the city to the west.
So the point was, Comfrey lives in unincorporated Shawnee County, Kansas, correct?
I don't know where he lives.
Well, he said west. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
I have one. This is Commissioner Pearson. I have one. I actually have my dentist office down there too, and it feels putting a housing down there feels more out of character than putting another office building of some sort down there. And they're absolutely correct. When you go down that road, I'm at the very end of the drive. My dentist office is down there. Just the road doesn't seem wide enough sometimes for me to go down by myself, let alone, I mean, I know it is, but the way it curves and goes down, I would question the ability to make that part of it safe if you increase the amount of vehicles on that road. And I'm not sure where they would be developing, if they'd be doing it up toward the top of that hill or down toward the bottom of that hill, because they definitely can't do it in the middle. There's not enough space. So, and it doesn't seem like I'm sure you could find someone who would want to live there, but I'm not sure I'd want to look at a bunch of office buildings. So that's just my opinion.
Okay. Mr. Fried?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with doing, we need housing. I don't have a problem with it. I have a problem with the M3 versus an M2. I think it allows for too much density. We don't have any control over the height of a building, and I'm out in that area, and there's, I think, a 10-story building, and they may not be able to make a 10-story building because of other requirements regardless, but it allows for it potentially if they can make it work. And I don't think that would be within the character of the area. So generally, I'm not against what they're trying to do, but I'm not in favor of the M3 zoning versus the M2.
Thank you. Mr. Nager?
I guess I think I understand this correctly, but I'm just gonna talk through it to make sure. So this would be M3. That's about 30 units per acre. At just under 2.5 acres, that would be like 75 units potentially. Yeah, okay. All right, well, that does seem intensive to me for this, like at the M3 rather than the M2 level. Thank you.
I have a question for staff. Is it, let's say this went through, is it possible to have on-street parking for this, or would it have to be all on the lot?
I'm going to respond to that. Mr. Dean, on-street parking is permitted. It's parallel parking, just like what occurs there now. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
But would there be if this were to go through, would there be, this gets developed, is it possible that that would be restricted when it goes through the staff and getting it, or is there a way to do that later, or is that?
My understanding of how that's done is the Public Works Department, on a case-by-case basis, makes that decision. I don't think they really like to do that because it creates other issues, but I think on a case-by-case basis, they can make that decision. I don't think it's based on any specific warrants, but that's how that's done. It's not really done. Typically, it's not done as part of the development process or the development review process.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner, can I clarify something just a bit about the traffic volume, if I could?
Sure.
So I think what's important to understand is it's already zoned for office development. And office development, all other things being equal in terms of, the size of the building, is probably going to generate a higher volume of traffic than residential. And one thing that, because we discussed this a bit about the potential traffic issue amongst ourselves, and what a different land use there will do is it'll offset the peak parking demand and the traffic demand. So I think that there's a tendency to look at what's there now and it's vacant and to compare the traffic generated compared to what's there now. But I think it's more appropriate to base it on what the current zoning allows, which is more office development. Food for thought.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, discussions? If not, we'd be open for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to approve as presented by staff.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Moved and seconded. Any more discussion on the motion? If not, would you please take the roll?
Mr. Dean?
Aye.
Mr. Freed?
No?
Ms. Herron?
Aye.
Mr. Presner?
Aye.
Mr. Nager?
No.
Ms. Pearson?
Nay.
Okay, so 3 approved and 3 did not.
Okay.
Motion fails.
Motion failed.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
you do have the authority to make an amendment to the recommendation to go to M2, if that's the pleasure of
So you can make a
someone.
motion that would make it an M2,
Yes, rather than an M3.
okay?
Mr. Freed, if you,
Sure, I'll be happy. I will make a motion to approve it with an amendment to M2 zoning from M3 zoning.
Okay. Do I have a second?
So, can we have public comment off of that? Because there's no way you can park on that street. If you're saying that you're gonna park up into the lot diagonally, that's one thing, but if you're gonna put parallel parking on that street gets cut by a third. A third. Gotta be able to put another lane in. You're gonna park on the street, just like any downtown. I mean,
Mr.
you
Hall,
park on the street.
well,
is it,
we'll allow
Park on the lot.
Sir, hold on a minute. We'll allow public comment since this is an amendment that they are considering. So if someone has a public comment on this, sir, would you like to get up and say something?
First of all, has it been do we need to second it first?
I second it.
You seconded it. Okay, so public comment and
Public comment.
before the vote.
Preliminary, like 5 years ago, I saw a plan where the parking was actually up on the lot at an angle, right? You had to go down, turn around in the cul-de-sac and come up and park onto the lot. If we're actually proposing that, how many units? Right? 30 units at, say, even 2 people, right? You're gonna have that many people parking parallel on a street that is engineered for just 2 lanes of traffic, not 2 lanes of traffic and someone parking on it too, right? Is that what this is? Is they're saying like parking on the street or parking up on the lot and having to back into the street?
Well, we don't really have a design. We don't have a design for it. Mr. Hall, currently it's available to be parked.
Because the data, he's making claims, but he's not saying, he's not giving us data for traffic flow on what's up there. They're trying to sell it to, they're trying to get a developer to get his land thing through instead of thinking about somebody on the street, actually on the street instead of up in this lot loading their car with their family. Like, they're gonna have their driver's side door open on that street. So I just think you guys need more data. I think that they're laughing at me being up here because I'm not an engineer and I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I'm just a dad. And I can imagine a mom trying to do that. It doesn't work. If you can park up in the lot, like the previous church plan was, where it was more up into the lot, well, then you got nowhere to put your building, which is why it's been sitting empty for 20 years or more. But to put people on that street, I think you guys need more data, or at least just go observe it for an hour. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Hall, can you?
Yeah, if I can clarify, so the question was asked earlier if on-street parking is permitted. It's permitted unless the city declares it a no parking zone and signs it as such. But with any physical development at that location, there will be off-street parking required. So a plan that the gentleman saw earlier, he mentioned off-street parking, parking on the lot. That is required for residential use. There are 2 off-street parking stalls required per unit in most cases. It gets to a certain size and that ratio changes. But in general, the city requires 2 off-street parking spaces per dwelling.
So they couldn't put apartments on there and all the parking would be on the street.
That
You'd
is
have
correct.
2 per every.
That is correct.
unit.
That would require something different. That would require a variance or something, and that's not gonna happen.
Right.
Parking.
Mr. Preisner?
Mr. Chair, quick question for the conferee. Currently, your clientele, do they park on the street?
No, they park in our parking lot. You got to have enough.
Perfect, designed well, thank you.
Yes. Still in public comment if you want to.
Hank Hudson. The question I have is, initially when this was zoned, and I was part of that, would have been like 96 or whatever onto it, one of the questions was, in zoning it that way, was that most of the doctor buildings at 5 o'clock or somewhere in that area would be basically done and there'd be lack of traffic at that point. My question comes into it is if we park and you have that, let's just say you put 30 units in, then they're going to park in the doctor's parking lots. In that, does that become a trespassing issue in dealing with that? Because I'm sure some of these don't want that in that. So obviously, if you have 30 apartments and you have 2 parking places per, and they bring friends over, then we increase that number into it. And like I said, we typically have alarms going off too quite often down through that area too, or on that. So are we gonna, or parking in that have issues with that in there too, so, and how would that be dealt with?
Thank you. Any other public comment on this, on the amendment?
Thank you. My name is Richard Bassett. I am part owner of the property. Appreciate you guys meeting with us, the comments that have been made. We, as has been said before, that property's been sitting there vacant for 26 years. Everything's ready. We got sewers, we got water, we have everything already paid for. The office building outlook in Topeka is no different than anywhere else. It's not good. And it might be sitting there another 26 years. Topeka is in dire need of living quarters, of living units. The comments about the parking, I think, although I would understand their concern, I think it's a little, let's see, not overblown, but brought to a point where we aren't going to build something that doesn't have a driveway, that doesn't have a way off the street. We would hope to accommodate our residents. So we would be happy with M2 at this point, and would encourage you to support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public would like to speak? Yes.
So I understand what was said earlier about, office space. If that does become office buildings, yes, there could be more people there, but depending on the type of business, they may just be staying there. That's fine. But just one question I have, with the traffic issues we've already had, one of the gentlemen brought up about the accidents that happen at Southwest Villa West and 29th Street. That already it's a blind area. I don't ever have to turn left. I always get to turn right, thankfully. And I would never want to have to turn left. But if this does go through and we're talking about the volume, we're talking maybe another 60 cars, right? If you've got 30 units, that's 60 cars that are going to be in that area on a regular basis. Is a light planned? Is that something that has to happen before this goes through? Just a question, because again, at the end of the day, yes, we want housing, but we want everything to be safe for everybody involved. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any additional public comment? If not, we'll close the public comment portion. We have a motion and a second on there. Open now for discussion by commissioners. Any questions for staff or anyone else? Mr. Nager?
I guess for city staff, my understanding, since we would be comparing the potential traffic of this not toward as comparing it to an empty lot, but this as compared to the current office zoning, that would be seen as a potential, like everything fully developed would be less traffic, so there would not be like a traffic light or something being looked into. Just
I'll try to respond to that question. So when we get a rezoning application, just regular zoning, proposal to change the zoning map, at that point, it'd be very unusual. I don't think we ever require a traffic study to analyze the impact on an intersection. But if we get a site plan that comes forward, if it reaches a certain threshold, then our traffic engineer will determine that a traffic study is required. And that could end up warning a traffic signal at that point. But it's not just an arbitrary decision. It's based on traffic volumes and peak volumes and that type of thing.
Thank you.
Mr. Freed? Oh, good. Any other questions, comments for staff? Not, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Would you please take the roll?
Mr. Dean,
Aye.
Mr. Freed,
Aye.
Ms. Herron,
Aye.
Mr. Preisner,
Aye.
Mr. Nager,
Aye.
Ms. Pearson.
Nay.
Motion passes 1.
Okay, thank you. Next is item E, communications to the commission. Mr. Warner?
Commissioners, you either have been or will be emailed the Kansas Open Meeting Act video. We thought about watching it tonight with everybody, but decided maybe that wasn't the best idea.
We appreciate that.
It's, it's short, it's about 20 minutes. So please watch that when you get a chance at your convenience and let Amanda know that you've watched it. City's legal department wants all the boards and commissions to review that video and kind of understand that Kansas Open Meetings Act.
Will there be a quiz for that?
Maybe.
Yes.
One thing, and I'm not going to get into this at all, just letting you know, Eugene and Paramore is coming back to the commission from the governing body, and that meeting's not until June 26th, so we don't have another planning commission meeting until June 26th. And I think that's all I have. Oh.
Yeah, I have a couple additional items I'll share as well. So Commissioner Pearson and I had some communication. I think everybody was on the email, but just in case to fill you in on where we're at, it was in regards to public comment and what that process looks like for the Planning Commission. So I'll be working with Mary Feeney in the legal department, and we're going to be looking at updating some of the bylaws to put some more procedures behind that policy. And I'm thinking July or August meeting to have that back in front of the commission for you guys to review. Additionally, I will add, I've had a couple people reach out about this, so it's worth noting that we are starting back up our conversations around accessory dwelling units and an ADU policy. So right now, the first step is to get back in front of, we're going to go through the Policy and Finance Committee. So we'll be meeting in front of that committee June 1st and just giving them an update, making sure everybody knows there was a survey that's taken place, just trying to catch everybody up to speed, and then we'll be forming a task force and outreach and doing some community engagement around that, at which point we'll be reaching out to several of you to see if you'd be interested in participating.
Yes, go ahead.
So with the task force, is it only going to be on the subject of accessory dwelling unit, or talking about this middle as a whole?
That's a good question. I might lean on Dan a little bit. I think that if the conversation gets larger, I think right now we're really focused on the policy specifically, but
I think it will definitely be ADUs as a priority, but I think we're going to bring some missing middle parking ideas to the task force. We may not get into some of the other missing middle things until we kind of get this one thing done. But we're going to try to bring some parking ideas along, some administrative. We can't do much with parking aside from making people do PUDs and things like that. So we might have some parking, administrative parking for missing middle that we'll also bring to the committee or worker task force.
Mr. Preisner?
Thank you, Chair. Question for Dan, Mary. Conferees that speak before the commission, are they not required to state their name and address?
I'd have to check the bylaws. I don't know whether they're required to do that. I know at city council they are.
Yeah, I know they are too. Okay, been down there. The holy question is we don't need to hear from conferees that don't live in the city. They have no jurisdiction on what we do as a planning commission. So we need to figure out how to nip that in the bud.
Well, I mean, we do regulate the 3-mile area outside of the city. So people who do live outside the city may want to comment on subdivision regulations or
We also
other
notice
things.
if a zoning case
Yeah.
in particular, something like this that butts up to the county, we notice out into the county. We actually go farther than we do in the city. So we notify people that are in the county if they're neighbors to the zoning.
Look at this issue tonight, the topography and the elevation of the property itself, and I'll call it green space between the city and the county to the west. I mean, I simply didn't understand what the angst was by the conferee. I mean, you know, if you live or drive in southwest Topeka, you know it's mad. So, all right, understood. Thank
Is
you.
there anything against someone from outside the city speaking to the city council and expressing their opinion?
No, there's nothing that would prevent
So I don't know that we can limit someone. I mean, you can put weight to it, but I don't think we can keep them from speaking.
Your chair lives outside the city.
Yeah.
Want to get small? Don't hate me. Any other questions, comments? Mr. Nager?
I've already watched that video about the, and I thought it was really well done. I really appreciated it. I remember learning about it whenever I took local government law in law school, and remember thinking that that chain meeting thing was probably not something many people knew about. And so I'm really glad that the city is making an effort to make people aware, and very much appreciative.
Thank you. Amanda, Mark, we've got one.
Gold star.
The study session will be at your house. Any other questions, comments? Not, we're adjourned. Thank you.
So, into